November 12th, 1886. The Wyoming high plains are deceptively quiet, a vast, golden ocean of dry grass waiting for a spark or a freeze. The wind here doesn't just blow, it scours. It hunts for cracks in the chinking of log cabins and freezes water in the basin before morning prayers. In the settlement of Granite Creek, the sound of late autumn is usually the rhythmic hacking sound of axes biting into pine, men racing against the inevitable drop of the mercury. Every family knows the equation. More wood means survival. A cord of oak is worth more than gold when the drifts hit the eaves. But on the edge of town, on a rocky patch of land that nobody else wanted, there is a different sound. It is the scraping of a shovel against hard-packed earth. Martha, a widow of 3 years with hands calloused harder than leather, is not chopping wood. She is digging a hole. To the casual observer, and certainly to the men spitting tobacco juice on the boardwalk of the general store, she looks like a woman who has lost her senses along with her husband. She stands waist deep in a rectangular trench, 12 feet long and 8 feet wide, throwing dirt over her shoulder with a mechanical, tireless rhythm. The town gossip, a man named Cyrus with a loud voice and a small imagination, leans against a hitching post, watching her silhouette dip and rise against the graying horizon. "Digging her own grave, is she?" Cyrus laughs, the sound harsh in the thin air. "Seems a mite oversized, even for a woman of her stature. Maybe she plans to bury her mule with her." The men around him chuckle, but it is a nervous laughter. They are anxious about their own wood piles, about the thinness of their walls. Mockery is a warm blanket when you are secretly afraid of the cold. They watch Martha because her behavior violates the fundamental rule of the frontier. To survive, you build up and you build thick. You conquer the land. You don't burrow into it like a prairie dog. Yet, Martha ignores them. She ignores the wind tearing at her bonnet and the dust coating her throat. She is focused on a specific measurement, a number she carries in her head like a prayer. 4 feet down, then 5, then 6. What the town doesn't realize is that Martha isn't just digging a hole. She is accessing a hidden layer of the Earth's physics that the rest of them have forgotten. While the air temperature in Granite Creek swings wildly, burning hot in July and deadly cold in January, the earth below the frost line is a constant battery. At 6 feet deep, the soil holds a steady temperature, roughly 50 degrees Fahrenheit, regardless of the blizzard raging above. It is a concept known as thermal inertia. Martha isn't building a home that fights the cold. She's building a home that the cold cannot find. But to Cyrus and the others, she is just a desperate woman moving dirt while the sky turns the color of a bruised plum, signaling the first true freeze of the season. The mockery intensifies as the structure begins to take shape, defying every architectural norm of the era. Most cabins in the territory are simple boxes, 4 walls, a pitched roof, a door facing the road. Symmetry is the standard. Martha's creation is aggressively asymmetrical, a jagged scar on the landscape. She builds the north-facing wall up from the earth using the very sod she excavated, stacking it thick and high, nearly 4 feet above ground level. This creates a defensive berm, a man-made hill designed to deflect the prevailing winter winds up and over her living space, rather than catching them flat on. A younger man named Thomas, who owns the livery stable and possesses a quieter curiosity than Cyrus, rides out to her plot on a Tuesday. He watches her struggle to wrestle a heavy timber into place along that high north wall. "Ma'am," he calls out, dismounting to help her hoist the beam, "I can't help but notice you're building a slant. That roof line, it's steep. Too steep for shingles to hold easy." He's looking at the angle. It's distinct. The roof slopes dramatically from the high north berm down to a remarkably low south wall, barely a foot off the ground. "It's not for shingles, Thomas," Martha says, wiping grime from her forehead. Her voice is level, devoid of the madness the town attributes to her. "And it's not random. It's 45 degrees. She points to the southern horizon, where the winter sun is currently beginning its low, lazy arc across the sky. In December, the sun stays low. This angle catches it. If I built it flat, the light would bounce off. If I built it like a cabin, I'd catch nothing but shadow." Thomas looks at the frame, then back at the sun. He is doing the mental geometry, scratching his chin. He is seeing, for the first time, that this isn't a house. It is a machine, a solar collector. But understanding the angle is one thing, accepting the materials is another. Later that week, Martha does something that nearly causes a riot of laughter at the saloon. She spends her meager savings not on cast iron stoves or woolen blankets, but on glass. Damaged panes, old sashes from a derelict hotel in the next county, mismatched glazing. She hauls a wagon load of fragile, shimmering glass back to her dirt pit. To the neighbors, this is suicide. Glass is the enemy of heat. Glass is where the warmth escapes. "She's building a crystal palace in the mud," Cyrus roars, slapping the bar top. "One hailstorm, one heavy snow, and she'll be freezing in a greenhouse filled with shards." They don't see the thermal calculation. They don't understand that while glass loses heat at night, it emits short-wave solar radiation during the day. If, and only if, you have a way to trap that energy. Martha isn't just letting the sun in. She has a plan to imprison it. The construction phase reveals the most critical and most misunderstood component of her survival system. While the neighbors are busy chinking their timber walls with moss and mud to keep drafts out, Martha is lining the interior of her earthen pit with rocks. Not timber, which feels warm to the touch, but cold, hard river stones. She spends days hauling wagon loads of smooth, dark basalt from the creek bed, laboriously stacking them against the rear, north-facing earthen wall. To the community, this looks like madness piled on top of foolishness. "Stone sucks the heat right out of a room," a neighbor named Sarah whispers to Thomas as they watch from a distance. "It's going to be like living in a tomb. It's damp, it's cold, and it's hard. Why wouldn't she use cedar? We have plenty of cedar." Sarah's logic is sound based on traditional intuition. Wood is an insulator. It resists the transfer of heat. If you touch a wooden wall, it doesn't feel cold. If you touch a stone in winter, it bites. But Martha isn't looking for insulation on that back wall. She is looking for thermal mass. Here is the principle the town misses. Insulation keeps heat in, but thermal mass stores heat. Wood has low thermal mass. It heats up fast and cools down fast. Stone, particularly dense dark basalt, is a thermal battery. It takes a long time to absorb energy, but once it does, it holds it, releasing it slowly over hours. Martha is building a delay timer for the sun. The sunlight will pass through her glass roof, strike the dark stone wall at the back of the dugout, and be absorbed. When the sun sets and the air temperature plunges to 20 below, that stone wall will still be radiating the heat it swallowed at noon. She mixes a mortar of clay and ash, sealing the stones tight. The floor, too, she paves with darker stones, leaving no dirt exposed. By early December, the Widow's Folly, as it has been christened, looks like a primitive bunker. The roof is a patchwork of glass panes sealed with tar and pine pitch. The back is buried in the earth. It sits low, unobtrusive, and ugly compared to the standing cabins. But as the first flakes begin to drift down, a silence falls over her plot. There is no smoke rising from a chimney because she hasn't installed one yet. This lack of smoke is the final proof for Cyrus. "She's already frozen," he claims. "No fire, no life." But if you are the kind of person who appreciates the hidden mechanics of survival, the kind of person who looks at a problem and sees a solution others miss, you might want to hit that subscribe button right now. We are about to see exactly how this misunderstood machine performs when the real test arrives. Because while the town is confident in their wood stoves, the barometer is dropping. Mid-December brings a tension you can taste. The sky loses its depth, flattening into a sheet of iron gray. The wind shifts, coming straight down from the Canadian Shield, carrying a bite that freezes the moisture inside a man's nose instantly. This is the prelude to what the old-timers call a blue norther, a front that moves so fast the temperature can drop 40 degrees in an hour. In the town square, the activity is frantic. Men are splitting wood by lantern light, their breath pluming like steam engines. The pile of chopped wood by the schoolhouse is dwindling. Cyrus is out there, shouting orders, checking the seals on his windows, nailing heavy canvas over the frames to add another layer of protection. He is fighting the cold with barriers, trying to keep the enemy out. Out at the dugout, Martha is doing something entirely different. She is not boarding up her windows. She is scrubbing them. She uses a mixture of vinegar and water to clean every inch of the glass roof, ensuring maximum transparency. Then she moves inside. She has placed two 50-gallon whiskey barrels filled with water right in the direct path of where the sun hits the floor. Water is an even better thermal battery than stone. It can hold massive amounts of energy before changing temperature. Thomas rides past one last time before the storm hits. The wind is already howling, kicking up dust and snow in blinding swirls. He sees Martha standing by her low door, checking the latch. "Storm's coming, Martha," he yells over the gale. "You got enough wood?" She looks at him, wrapped in a heavy shawl, and shakes her head. "I have enough, son," she shouts back. Thomas rides away, shaking his head. He likes her, but he fears he will be digging her out of a frozen tomb come spring. He doesn't know that inside her strange, buried home, the thermometer on the wall reads 65 degrees, and the fire hasn't even been lit. The test has begun. The storm hits Granite Creek not as weather, but as a physical assault. It begins 2 hours after sundown, a screaming wall of white that erases the horizon line in seconds. The temperature plummets with terrifying speed, a phenomenon known as a flash freeze. In the saloon, the mercury in the thermometer by the door drops visible degrees every time someone checks it. 30, 20, 0. By midnight, it is 25 below, and the wind chill is pushing the sensation on exposed skin to nearly 60 below zero. The sound is deafening, a relentless roar that shakes the heavy timber frames of the town's sturdiest buildings. Inside the cabins, the reality of thermal bridging becomes a life-or-death physics lesson. The iron nails holding the siding together conduct the cold straight through the wood. By 3 a.m., the interior heads of the nails are frosted white, looking like ghostly eyes staring out from the walls. Cyrus, the loudest critic of the Widows Project, is no longer laughing. He is fighting a losing battle in his own home. He and his 2 sons are feeding their cast iron stove constantly, throwing split oak logs into the maw every 20 minutes. But the heat is being sucked out faster than they can generate it. The difference in pressure between the warm air inside and the howling gale outside creates a vacuum effect. Cold air is being pulled through invisible cracks in the floorboards, through the keyhole, through the very pores of the chinking. The area near the stove is blistering hot, but 3 feet away, a cup of water on the table has developed a skin of ice. They are burning their winter fuel supply at triple the expected rate, and the room is still freezing. This is the brutality of the fight mentality, trying to overpower the atmosphere with combustion. It is a battle of attrition, and the atmosphere has more ammunition. Meanwhile, the snow is drifting. It piles up against the north walls of the cabins, reaching the windowsills, then the eaves. In a standard cabin, this is dangerous. The weight pushes against flat surfaces, groaning and creaking. But the wind is the true killer. It strips the heat envelope away from the structures instantly. Every time the wind gusts, the temperature inside Cyrus's cabin drops another degree. Fear begins to set in. The deep, primal panic of realizing the woodpile might not last the week, let alone the winter. They are prisoners in their own home, huddled in blankets that feel like paper, waiting for the dawn that seems like it might never come. As the sun finally breaks the horizon the next morning, it offers no warmth, only a blinding, cold light reflecting off 5 feet of fresh snow. The wind has died down to a manageable howl, but the air is still deadly still and frigid. Thomas, the stable owner, forces his door open, shoving against a massive drift. He is wrapped in furs, his breath freezing in his beard instantly. His first thought is for his horses. His second is for Martha. Guilt gnaws at him. He had watched her digging that hole, heard the town mock her, and done little to stop it. He imagines the dugout now, buried, crushed, or simply turned into an icebox. A hole in the ground would surely fill with snow, he reasons. She is likely dead. He straps on his snowshoes, grabs a shovel, and begins the slow, exhausting trek toward the edge of town, intending to recover a body. When Thomas crests the small ridge overlooking Martha's plot, he stops dead in his tracks. He expects to see a smooth expanse of white where the dugout used to be. Instead, he sees a black scar in the snow. The steep, glass-faced roof has shed the snow entirely. The 45-degree angle, combined with the slick surface of the glass, meant the snow couldn't stick. It slid off, piling up on the low southern ground, leaving the glass completely exposed to the morning sun. But that isn't what stops his heart. It's the visual distortion. The air directly above the glass is shimmering. It's the same wave-like distortion you see above a hot road in July. Heat. Visible, rising heat. He hurries down the slope, the snow crunching loudly under his feet. There is no smoke rising from a chimney, which terrifies him again. Had the fire gone out? He reaches the door, which is tucked into the earth on the side, sheltered by the berm. He braces himself for the worst, pulling the latch. The door is heavy, insulated with straw packed between planks. It swings open with a groan, and Thomas is hit in the face, not by the stench of death, but by a wall of air so warm and humid it feels like entering a bakery. He stumbles inside, blinking against the sudden transition. He pulls the scarf from his face, gasping. He isn't shivering, he is sweating. Inside, the silence is the first thing that registers. The wind outside is a memory. Here, deep in the earth, the world is still. The second thing is the light. The low winter sun is streaming through the angled glass, flooding the small space with a brilliance that makes the dark basalt stones on the back wall glow. Martha is sitting in a rocking chair knitting. She looks up, surprised. "Thomas," she says, her voice calm, "close the door. You're letting the heat out." Thomas stands paralyzed. He looks at the thermometer hanging on the wooden support post. It reads 68 degrees. He looks at the stove in the corner. It is cold. There is no fire. There are no ashes. Before we explain exactly why Thomas is sweating while his neighbors are freezing, I want you to pause and ask yourself, when was the last time you solved a problem by removing something rather than adding something? Martha didn't add a bigger stove. She removed the exposure to the wind. This is a principle of subtractive design that we often ignore in favor of more technology, more power, more consumption. If you're enjoying this deep dive into forgotten survival science, and you want to see more stories about how the past can teach us to survive the future, take a second to subscribe. Now, let's look at the physics of why that stone wall is warm to the touch. The mechanism at work here is the greenhouse effect, weaponized for survival. It starts with the glass. Solar energy travels through the vacuum of space as shortwave radiation. Glass is transparent to these short waves. They pass through Martha's roof almost unimpeded, striking the dark stone floor and the black basalt back wall. When light hits these dense, dark surfaces, it is absorbed and converted into heat. This heat tries to bounce back out, but in the process it changes form. It becomes long-wave infrared radiation. Here is the magic. Glass is not transparent to long-wave radiation. It acts as a mirror for heat. The energy gets in, transforms, and cannot get out. It is trapped. But trapping heat is only half the battle. You have to store it. This is where the thermal mass comes into play. If Martha had built her walls of wood, the room would heat up to 100 degrees at noon and drop to freezing at night. Wood is an insulator, not a battery. But the tons of stone and the 100 gallons of water in the whiskey barrels act as a thermal flywheel. They absorb the excess heat during the day, preventing the room from overheating. As the sun sets and the outside air drops to -30, the heat flow reverses. The stones, now warmer than the air in the room, begin to radiate their stored energy back into the space. The earth surrounding the dugout, which is a constant 50 degrees, acts as a baseline, meaning the stones only have to bridge the gap from 50 to 65, rather than from -30 to 65. Thomas walks over to the water barrels. He touches the wood, then dips a finger into the open top. The water is tepid, almost warm. "Physics," Martha says, noticing his bewilderment. "Just physics, Thomas. The sun gives us more power in an hour than Cyrus can chop in a month. I just built a trap to catch it." She stands and walks to the back wall, pressing her hand against the black rock. "Feel this." Thomas obeys. The rock feels alive, radiating a gentle, steady warmth that penetrates his frozen gloves. It's not the sharp, scorching heat of a stove that burns your face while your back freezes. It's an ambient, enveloping warmth, like a living creature. By noon, the secret is out. Thomas didn't just survive his visit. He stayed for coffee, boiled on a small alcohol lamp, since the big stove wasn't needed. When he returns to town, he doesn't just bring news, he brings refugees. Cyrus, humbled by the gnawing cold in his dwindling woodpile, swallows his pride. He arrives at the dugout with his wife and children, their lips blue, wrapped in every blanket they own. They expect a damp, dark cave. They step into a sun-drenched sanctuary. The social dynamic of Granite Creek fractures and reforms in that instant. The hierarchy based on strength and wood-chopping prowess dissolves, replaced by a hierarchy of knowledge. The dugout becomes a temporary shelter for the most vulnerable. Space is tight, but the air is clean. No smoke, no soot, just the smell of earth and warm stone. The skeptics sit on the floor, their backs against the dirt walls, and for the first time in days, they stop shivering. Cyrus walks around the perimeter, tapping the glass, inspecting the angle of the roof. He is a builder, a man of mechanics. He sees the logic now, undeniable and tangible. 45 degrees, he mutters, looking at the sun, to catch the low arc. He looks at the stone wall, and the rock holds it. He looks at Martha, not with the mockery of the previous week, but with a bewildered respect. "We've been fighting the wind," he admits quietly. "You just let it blow over you." The validation is absolute. It is quantified not in arguments, but in degrees Fahrenheit and cords of wood saved. While the rest of the town burned through half their winter fuel in 3 days of blizzard, Martha used 0. The widow's folly has become the widow's fortress. The realization spreads that their traditional cabins, symbols of civilization and conquest, are actually maladapted to the environment. They are wooden tents fighting a war against the Arctic, while Martha's hole is a part of the landscape itself. She didn't conquer the environment, she cooperated with it. This shift in perspective, from conquest to cooperation, is the true lesson, far more valuable than the heat itself. In the weeks that follow, as the snow melts and the spring thaw turns the plains to mud, the architecture of Granite Creek begins to change. It starts slowly. A lean-to greenhouse appears on the south side of the general store. Then, Thomas digs a root cellar that extends into a living space. By the following autumn, 3 new families have broken ground not on log cabins, but on strong, earth-sheltered structures. They use the local stone, the local sod, and the universal geometry of the sun. They come to Martha not for charity, but for consultation. She shows them how to calculate the roof angle based on their latitude, how to mix the clay mortar, how to layer the glazing. The Granite Creek style, as it comes to be known in local lore, is a hybrid. It uses the timber they have for structure, but relies on the earth for insulation and the sun for heat. The town becomes a strange, futuristic experiment in the middle of the Old West. A community of semi-subterranean glass-fronted homes that glow like lanterns in the winter nights. They have learned that true resilience isn't about how thick your walls are, but how smart your design is. They learned that the most advanced technology they had wasn't the steam engine or the rifle, but the ability to observe and mimic the natural world. Martha lives out her days in the home she dug. She never remarries, but she is never alone. Her home becomes a gathering place, a school of sorts, where the physics of survival are passed down alongside recipes and gossip. She proved that one person, armed with the correct principles, can outperform a whole community armed with the wrong assumptions. As we look back at this story from the comfort of our modern, climate-controlled lives, it's easy to see it as a quirky historical footnote. But ask yourself, if the power grid went down tomorrow, if the gas stopped flowing, how long would your home keep you warm? Martha's dugout didn't need a grid. It didn't need a supply chain. It needed the sun and the dirt. In an age where we are increasingly disconnected from the sources of our survival, perhaps the most advanced thing we can do is look down at the ground beneath our feet and relearn the lessons of the widow of Granite Creek. However, a critical safety note before you grab a shovel. Earth is heavy. A cubic yard of soil can weigh nearly 3,000 pounds. Digging a cave without proper shoring, engineering knowledge, and structural reinforcement is a great way to build a grave, not a home. Martha's success came from calculation, not just effort. If you are inspired to build, consult an engineer, understand your soil types, and respect the weight of the world. Survival is about mitigating risk, not creating new ones. Stay curious, stay warm, and we'll see you in the next one.